Hello, welcome to Political Thinking, a conversation with, rather than an interrogation of, someone who shapes our political thinking about what has shaped theirs. My guest this week once described herself as young, black and loud, and Nimco Ali has plenty to be loud about. She led a global campaign to end the cutting of girls, FGM, female genital mutilation. And in that role, she met Boris Johnson when he was running to be mayor of London. She became an advisor to him, a friend of his and of his girlfriend, now wife, Carrie Johnson. Nimco Ali has praised the Prime Minister as a real champion of women's rights and one of my feminist heroes. He appointed her as a government advisor on tackling violence against women and girls. Nimco Ali.
Hi.
Welcome to Political Thinking. Are you still getting used to being the campaigner who suddenly finds herself on the inside, walking through the corridors of power?
No, I think nothing's really changed in that kind of instance. It's the fact that I still see these people that can actually help. So whether I'm sitting around the table with them or chasing them down the street, I think they're quite similar in that sense. But I will actually correct you. I'm appointed by Priti Patel and not the Prime Minister.
Not directly by the Prime Minister.
Not directly Prime Minister, but directly by Priti Patel. And this was a position she asked me to take up.
But I sense that the reason you're correcting me is that you have the problem that many people find in public life, which is people go, oh, she's only got the job because she's a chum of the Prime Minister.
100%. And as somebody that has kind of fought my way in order to have a voice and actually really believes in integrity and also democracy. It's something that I've worked for, and it's something that the Home Secretary, when she said that she was going to do a violence against women and girls strategy, came to me with. And then I said I would be more than happy to do that, because ironically I do have this kind of space where I can talk to the sector in terms of the violence against women and girls sector, who don't actually feel that comfortable with talking to a Conservative party, and then also we're talking to ministers. So I see myself as a kind of a bridge between power and those with purpose.
So being a bridge is a helpful thing,
yeah,
but at times, is it actually a barrier, the fact that people say, hold on, she's mates with the Prime Minister and his wife? Does that then become a bit of a barrier to people?
Only to people that are disingenuous. So the whole point is, having been in the sector for almost a decade, or actually beyond a decade, almost 11 years of fighting to end female genital mutilation and other forms of violence, I think those that want to be able to do the job in order to end violence against women and girls actually know what my credentials are.
What about the protection of girls and young women as they just walk around the street? We all remember those scenes at Sarah Everard's vigil.
Yeah.
And you were amongst those who condemned the way the police reacted.
100%. I think there are more culture changes that need to happen. And for me, I would specifically love public sexual harassment to become a crime. But that is something that is, one of the things that I've seen is that a department and a Secretary of State can have an opinion, and then there can be other things that kind of push back. So cabinet,
other things or other people?
Other people, and cabinet responsibility is a thing. So the whole point, so that's what I'm saying as a thing, is as not just individuals. So I do think that there is at times a very masculine conversation where the government and how government and institutions work. So we need to be able to address that.
So why isn't this happening?
Because a lot of people come to the same conclusion as you.
A lot of people, hold on, you're the government's advisor. You've got the back of the Home Secretary and trying to work out why it doesn't happen.
I know.
Is it because people at the top of the government, is it those people in number 10 who advise the Prime Minister saying, I'm not sure I'd have this argument if I were you?
Well, I'm still going to have the argument. So the whole point, I think that's my key thing about being an independent advisor. I think that we are actually corroding society, and we are allowing young women to be subjected to lived experiences which are going to, have a massive detriment to their health on a day-to-day basis.
What I'm trying to get at, though, is it the kind of political advisors? Is it the people who try to win elections for the Tory party going, don't have this row, this isn't a row you want to have, this doesn't win votes?
I think it's a lot closer than that. So I'm obviously, I've become semi-affair with how to avoid the questions. So that's, to that point. So you can take from my silence as to whoever you want to put, but I can just say that the Home Secretary and other people within the Home Office are very much behind.
Yeah, I'm going to assume that the Prime Minister is not in this case. Let's go back to what brought you actually to his attention, to the world's attention as well, which is this extraordinary campaign you ran for many years, are still running, against the cutting of girls of FGM. For those who don't know your story, let's talk about that if we can. When did you first know that this was going to happen to you?
It was just before it happened. So there was a conversation around this. I was 7 at the time, and we were in Djibouti, having just left Somaliland, where the civil war had broken out. And we were on our way back to Manchester. So we were waiting for visas and things to kind of clear. So there was a conversation around the FGM, but I didn't necessarily know the realities of what it was. And for me, I think it wasn't necessarily, I didn't know what the act was going to entail. But when the cutter came to the house, I was very much taken aback by the way that she looked. It was, ironically, she looked quite similar to, I said once, to one of those dementors in Harry Potter. She was dressed in black, and it was stories that the nannies and others used to tell us about, like, if we misbehaved, there were going to be these people that would do these things. So yeah, it was ultimately just somebody that I felt a bit uncomfortable with essentially.
But you raised it with your teacher, didn't you?
I did, because I wasn't embarrassed by it. I was confused by the whole thing. So,
but when you raised it, was it to say this terrible thing's happened to me, or to be puzzled and say what was all that
no, it was
about?
this weird thing. And what's really interesting is it's the fact that I don't actually equate it with pain after the first few kind of weeks of having it initially, until obviously I had major complications afterwards. So I didn't actually say.
When you say major complications, you almost died.
I did almost die, yeah. But I'm just
Because?
because I had a very invasive form of FGM, which is called infibulation, and it's very common in the Horn of Africa, which ended up leading to me having near kidney failure. My most kind of upsetting a moment at that was when I was 11 and I ended up having the seizure in the middle of, I fainted in the middle of school, in the primary school, because of my kidneys failing. I remember waking up in the hospital, and I still vividly remember this nurse who had like incredibly curly ginger hair, and I was thinking, well, you've actually seen my anatomy, so you must be able to tell me what's wrong. And she was just smiling at me, so I just smiled back thinking, okay, this is really bizarre, because you have actually physically seen my anatomy, and you know that there was something that happened to me. So can you at least put that into context? So again, I think there was a level of fear that was created by this political correctness of not asking what brown people do, because it was racist to care about me, but actually, ironically, it was actually racist not to care about me.
Yeah, and assumption it was better not to talk about it. Better just to say that's up to you, that's up to your family, your community.
100%. And the whole point is that my race and my community was put before my humanity and my basically and my childhood to a certain extent.
But thanks to your campaign, the campaign of others, are you as confident as you can be that girls in a similar situation to Nimco Ali, girls who are the age you were then, you can't eradicate it, I imagine, but it's much less common than it was.
Yeah, I never used the word eradicating, because it sounds like a virus. This is a purposeful act where you have to take several steps in order to kind of do that. So we use end more kind of precisely. No, 100%. I think if I was 7 years old today, I would not I would not have had FGM, because my mother would have been supported in the sense that she knew it was a crime. If I was 11 and I turned up at a hospital, there would be child protection people that would come in. So I do think that girls are protected more, and I do think so there's a fallacy that a lot of people think that the numbers of FGM in the UK are new people that are coming into the country that are being added to the statistics that we currently have. At the moment, I have an 11-year-old niece, and I look her through sometimes with pride and with envy at the same time, that the issue that almost killed me when I was her age is something that's non-existent to her. So I think within a generation, we can change the lives of women and girls in this country.
Now, it's this campaign that first introduces you to Boris Johnson more than 10 years ago now, and you shouted at him on the street.
In Putney High Street. I didn't shout at him, I actually ran after him, because I was actually kind of confused why he was walking down Putney High Street, but that's when he was running for the Mayor of London. I said, can I just talk to you about FGM? And he was quite horrified that it was still going on. And then he gave me his contact details.
And were you surprised? That's your first encounter with a major politician, I would imagine. No, you're from a Labour supporting background.
Yeah, from a Blairite.
And he's a Tory.
Yeah.
Were you surprised at his reaction?
Do you know what? At the time, and I think this is one of the things that's been quite successful for him as a campaigner, is the fact that I wasn't seeing him in his political kind of element. I was seeing him as somebody that was going to go into power and do and be able to kind of make change. I wasn't really actually expecting him to win. I thought Ken Livingstone was going to win at the time, and I'd written to Ken Livingstone, and he replied back saying, "We're going to see how this plays with the mosques." How this plays out with the mosques was the actual question, and I thought,
literally those words.
yeah. That was the message I kind of got back. And it was this, and again, it was being taken back to when I was a child, where community and votes came before my, well-being and the well-being of girls that look like me.
So at that stage, Boris Johnson did a lot more than just giving you his card. You worked very closely with him, or at least his team.
Yeah, 100%. And one of the things that he did is that he actually set up a Violence Against Women and Girls board, which was, it was bipartisan. There was people that were from the Labour Party on that campaign and everything else. I think what he does do very well is that he does delegate and have people that are able to understand.
Did you then get what you've got now that we discussed at the beginning? People saying to you, how can you work with him? How can you work with a Tory?
No, 100%. It's always said that to me, but my thing is that I'm trying to... this is the thing that I say about the way that I do politics. It's the fact that I will work with anybody in power. When it comes to personal stuff, it's about voting for people and dating. Like, I'm not going to date people or vote for people I don't agree with, but if they're in power, I'm going to work with them. And I think it's like, I don't have the privilege, and I'm not that egotistical to think that I'm going to wait until somebody that I politically agree with can actually make changes. Like, for example, the UN spent 30 years trying to ban FGM in Sudan. I started to work with Mike Pompeo. It was done within 6 months. So the reality is that a broken clock can be right twice a day. And I found that many times in people that I don't politically agree with.
Working with people you disagree with, but being political in a different way. You said it was like dating. You actually did run, not for the Conservative Party, not for the Labour Party. You ran for the Women's Equality Party in the 2017 election.
Yeah, I did, because the thing about politics, and for me, I'm not going to stand for a party that I don't believe in everything that they stand for. And the Women's Equality Party fundamentally stood for, the things that I would be whipped on if we had gone into power were things that I cared about, and those were policies that would lead to real democracy and equality.
And given your upbringing, why not Labour?
Do you know what? I really, I'm political. I don't want to be a politician. And I just need to be honest about that. It's the fact that I have a lot of respect for people that are politicians. And that's just the choice that they make. And again, coming back to the dating analogy, knocking on doors, trying to get people to vote for you is asking somebody that told you they're not interested in you for a second date. It's honestly one of the most soul-destroying things that I've ever done in my life.
It's not just embarrassing. It can be frightening these days, can't it?
100%.
I mean, you had threats.
But this is what I mean. And imagine if I stood for a Conservative Party, I had threats. But the threats for me, what kind of made those threats more painful was they became legitimised because the left and the Labour Party specifically were wondering, why the hell am I standing?
Wondering, or you mean actually abusing you?
They were abusing me, but I'm just trying to be polite.
So when you tell us what you got. There was a letter, wasn't there, when you ran as a candidate?
Yeah, I did, but that letter only...
What did it say?
That letter was it was basically it was full of vile, racist kind of language, and it was threatening to harm me.
And
but ultimately,
was signed?
No, it wasn't signed, I don't think, at the time.
One letter I'm told you got from Catherine Mayer, who's the co-founder of the party, was signed Joe Cox.
Oh, yeah, that was the one, but I was just saying it wasn't signed by Joe Cox itself. The fact that I didn't want to take her name in vain.
But at that time in particular,
yeah,
getting a letter in 2017, she was murdered in 2016, the threat was not only revolting but clear. It was.
You know what? It was scary, and I don't want to put young black women off politics, and that's one of the key things.
Catherine Mayer told us that you said hell yes when she asked you, are you going to carry on campaigning after that letter?
No, 100%.
You have no doubt.
Yeah.
Do you think that abuse you received, not the letter, not the death threats, but the political abuse you got from some on the left, in a sense pushed you closer to the Conservatives, pushed you closer to people like Boris Johnson?
No, it's because, do you know what? The Conservative Party, when I found them in the kind of, I think post Blair, it was a very interesting space for young people like myself to be in, and the coalition government was very interesting, and I don't think actually that David Cameron was that dissimilar to Tony Blair. So I think I actually just found more commonality with.
The reason I say that, you see, is say politics is a bit like dating and you'll work with anybody.
Yeah.
You did more than work with Boris Johnson. I mean, you praised him as a real champion of women's rights. You described him as one of my feminist heroes. This wasn't just working with him. You were saying, he's the guy. I found the guy's going to sort it.
Yeah, no, I really wanted him to become Prime Minister. So I was happy to do that because he did and he does believe in gender equality. And I think that's one of the, do you know what, sitting down with people and getting to know them personally, you get to know what makes them tick and what not. Like, for example, I wouldn't write that kind of stuff for Jacob Rees-Mogg because I don't think he's a feminist. I don't think he believes in the basic human rights that women are meant to uphold. And it kind of scares me that if there is a leadership, again, that there will be people who are in the forefront, like Jeremy Hunt, for example, who doesn't believe in access to abortion to 24 weeks. He wants to bring that, he's been open about bringing that down to 12 weeks. So for me, it's like, it is about protecting fundamental things that I care about.
And when you look over the pond, you look at that debate that's now happening about Roe versus Wade, the critical legal judgment that gave women what's always referred to as the right to choose. Do you think if it happens, we might see an impact on our politics here?
100%. It's actually quite embarrassing that no senior government person has actually stood out like the Canadians have and said that the right to an abortion is a fundamental human right. Canada has said that. Other G7 leading countries or people have actually within those governments have said it.
Now, you became not just an ally in this campaign of Boris Johnson's, but a close friend of the family, particularly a close friend of Carrie, who went on to be his wife, partly because you campaigned together and you're an admirer of her campaigning. Why is that?
No, I completely respect anybody that uses something that happened to them in order to be selfless and be able to speak up and be able to change the lives of other women. So
she was attacked by John Warburton.
Yeah, so she
attacked about 100 people, I think, known as the
women,
Black Cap
women,
rapist.
100 women. So, and the fact that she waived their anonymity and spoke as passionate as she did and made sure that a dangerous man is not behind bars and doesn't abuse other women, I think that is something that was, for me, that was one of the most incredible things that kind of kicked off our friendship.
And were you valuable to her, do you think?
I said, but no,
Well, because you've been a campaigner, I mean, because you've been in the public eye. I mean, were there things you could teach her?
Oh, teach? No, I didn't teach her anything because she's an incredible campaigner and an accomplished comms director.
I assume you pause then because, in a sense, you think there's a limit to what the public have a right to know about what is a personal friendship. Is that right?
100%. Yeah, I think, I definitely respect that. And I think for us, yeah.
How do you feel, though, as a friend, and this may be something you can talk about the abuse that she suffered?
Do you know what? It's horrific. And to also understand, the fact that it's a young woman, just like a new mother, and in a position where she's not elected, her husband is, and she just happens to love somebody that's in power. I think it's it's incredibly painful to watch anybody that you care about suffer like that.
So names like Lady Macbeth hurt?
I think 100%. I think if you look at social media, I think there are a lot of kind of things that I said. And again,
it's not just social media, is it? I mean, goodness me, these are quotes, Lady Macbeth, Princess Nut coming from inside Downing Street. They're not coming from some, guy in a pub or in their bedroom abusing her.
But there's a lot of insecure men around in this world. So the fact that the first thing that they do is when they see a woman of power is that they push back.
But that, to be fair, is the confusion in the position of Carrie Johnson, isn't it? Is she somebody who just happens to be in the public eye because she's married to someone in power? Or is she someone of power herself, who, after all, was a political advisor to senior ministers, is a friend to senior ministers, was a senior press officer for the Conservative Party, someone who has her own political agenda, her own ideas, her own allies? And in that sense, isn't she entitled to have some scrutiny?
Well, like me, she respects due process and democracy. So I think in terms of me saying power, I'm talking about her campaigning on animal rights and on climate, and the whole point when she led the whole campaign around plastic. So this is a person that is actually renowned and able to do things in her own right. I think it's actually quite sexist to reduce her to the wife of the Prime Minister when she in herself has her own campaign and the ability to be able to change the things that she believes in and she's passionate about.
Let's just tick them off and then we can move on. There are other things people say, that you're godmother to Wilfred. Is that right or is that wrong? Or
he's an incredible young man, I can say that.
Understood. We interpret your silence. And of course, there was some controversy around the fact that you went into the flat during COVID to give support to them. Does it annoy you? People ask questions about that.
Do you know what annoys me is the fact that the same people that were writing, asking for questions to be answered, were the same people that were inboxing me saying, "I know it's within the rules." So sometimes it actually just becomes a spectacle. It was like within the rules that I was a single person in London. I spent 18 months of my lockdown on my own, and I still live on my own. So it was allowed in tier 4 in order for a single person to be able to join in the child care bubble kind of thing. And I do sometimes it can, it is a little bit offensive where this whole kind of thing of like hashtag the nanny and all these other kind of things. But you know what? It was my friend. I was grateful to be able to not to spend, because my birthday is also on the 27th of December. So I was grateful not to spend time alone after spending almost a year in lockdown on my own.
Now, you've been really clear that working with someone on things that you agree about is not the same as sharing their politics. You ran for the Women's Equality Party. At the last election, you did not vote Conservative. You made it clear that you were voting Green. But now you don't work for him, as you made clear. You work for the Home Secretary. You work for his government. Are there times when you just, when you're looking after Wilfred or something, you want to just cut through all that nonsense, all the civil servants and the committee and the Home Secretary say, "Come on, Boris, why don't you just do this?"
100% no, because that would be lobbying, and I'm very clear on that whole point. So,
oh really? You've been told that that's inappropriate. You can't have that conversation.
No. I've just read the constitution of this country, the semi-written constitution of this country. So, and I think the thing that people don't necessarily understand about me is the fact that I am a product of civil war. So I know how when you don't respect the due process of a country, things can actually kind of fall apart. So I would never step outside of my remit as being a friend or when I'm in a political space or in a workspace to be in that kind of space. And for me, ethics and those kind of principles really matter to me. And ultimately, whether Boris stays or goes or whatever happens, I want to be able to make sure that there are civil servants, there are ministers, and there are people that are in this country that continue the work that I care about.
Well, if he ever does go, some people will think it's because he doesn't do what you've just said you do, because he doesn't respect due process. Is that a fair comment?
Politics is an interesting space.
Has it been an uncomfortable thing for you as someone who believes in those values
to
watch some of the things happening in Downing Street?
It's a very interesting space to be in, and I think the greatest of friends are those that hold you accountable and hold a mirror to you. So, I can, like I said, I can kind of respect people but not necessarily agree with them wholeheartedly.
You think mistakes were made? The breaking the rules on COVID was a mistake?
For me, actually, I think I'm more interested in the fact that we're failing and we're falling behind in being a global leader that we could be. So, for example, things that really should be on the forefront. So Afghanistan, Ethiopia, which is basically at civil war at the moment, droughts in the Horn of Africa, and other things that really should be taking precedent at the moment are not being talked about. So I think a lot of the departments that could be doing great work are actually falling behind.
Afghanistan in what way?
Afghanistan, the fact that 90% of Afghan's population are starving, the fact that we've actually just ignored the Taliban in the way that they're treating women, and I think we were completely wrong in the way that we cut and run. And yes, America did what it did, but ultimately I think we should have held ourselves to a high standard of respect and a duty of care to the people that we were basically working with for almost 20 years.
You earlier, when I asked you something, said people will notice my silence. And people have noticed your silence when it comes to Boris Johnson more generally. You've been quiet about it. You once said, "I believed in him. I believed in his ability to deliver." Do you still?
Did I say that publicly?
You did.
I did again. Though I believe in the fact that he can still deliver. There's still 18 months left in this parliament.
And it must be awkward at times to be so close to the Prime Minister's wife, frustrated about policy. Is that awkward for you? Awkward for her in the end?
Well, it's not really that awkward. I think it's just the whole point is the fact that I think we both love and respect each other in that kind of sense. So, and I don't necessarily disagree with with him or his kind of policies, but it's just the fact that sometimes the things that you care about have to take a back burner to other things, and ultimately that means that you just don't give up, but you just keep pushing it along.
If you could now talk to your old self, the campaigner, perhaps even the person who hadn't yet met the future Mayor of London, the future Prime Minister, would you say, do it, do exactly what I've done? Or would you say, you know what, you have much more power on the outside? Keep your independence.
I think, I would have definitely done it, but I would have worked smarter. I would have worked smarter, not as hard, because it is actually exhausting trying to keep everyone happy.
Nimco Ali, thank you very much for joining me on Political Thinking.
Thank you.
A question which I think friends as well as critics of Nimco Ali might have is whether she's benefited more from her association with Boris Johnson or he has benefited more. Has he, in other words, adopted and gained from her brand of campaigning power? If I put that to her, I suspect we'd get one of those Nimco Ali silences. Thanks for watching.